listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of Extra Extra. It's all about whiskey. I remain your host, Jason Johnston Yellen, known by many names, and my good friend, here he is, staring me square in the eyes after 2 weeks of me being away, not you being away, is Joshua Morrissey Hatton. Hello, Joshua.
Hello, Jason. How you doing?
Good. You and I, in the annals of Extra Extra, that was annals of Extra Extra, 2 N's. We bring a whiskey-related story to the attention of the other. We cover it in the first half of the episode. We riff on it in the second half, and we get out of here in a tight 30 to 35 minutes. Mm-hmm. In recent history, it's been a tight 35 every time. Set your watch by us. Sometimes we surprise the other with a news story. But this week, we actually have a news story that dropped just as I was leaving Radio Contact for a couple of weeks. And so we're going to dip back into what I thought was a pretty big whiskey story.
Yeah, receiving this PR piece, I was almost upset that it came when it came, because it was just as you were leaving and you're shutting off your phones. And this is something, if I'm being honest, that should have been recorded when it came and before everybody knew all the news. But here we are, Jason. I can't blame you for wanting to enjoy a little vacay.
Well, if history has taught me anything, it's that people won't really formulate their opinions until they hear us riff on this. So the whiskey world can formulate final conclusions as we run through today's Extra Extra. You, Josh, are in charge of reading it, so why don't you spoil us? Oh, and again, we don't do PR pieces, and this will now be the second one this season.
That's a really good point. We make a point of not doing PR pieces. And
we do make a point of it, and now we've done 2. They're both very, very short, and they only come to us from very close friends. So, PR companies, don't get excited. Don't start sending in your press releases. Just keep it under wraps. Send it to the newspaper, and then we'll read it from the newspaper.
So this came to us from our friends at Elixir Distillers. You all may remember Elixir Distillers. We had Oliver Chilton on here at least once. And Chris Mabin.
On One Nation Under Whiskey.
Yeah. Sorry, Jason. On One Nation Under Whiskey. We've had Chris Mabin on One Nation Under Whiskey. We've had Chanel LaCour on Movies, Mates, and Malts, right?
Triple N, as I like to call it.
Triple M. And they're all part of Elixir Distillers, owners of Tot Rum and Port Askaig and Single Malts of Scotland, Elements of Islay, and now the owners of a shiny new distillery. So the headline of the PR piece.
I'm not letting you off the hook that easily. I'm glad I could go away for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No. Port Askaig. The distillery that they're currently building.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that. However, that is older news. They've only just started, they've broken ground. They're building. I think that's older news. I didn't feel as if I had...
We only just covered the new name 3 or so episodes ago. Because I was still in Scotland when we covered the new name being released for Port Askaig.
My point is, Jason, I have a PR piece that I need to get to.
I'm ready to hear it.
So, the headline is, Elixir Distillers to buy Tormore Distillery from Pernod Ricard. Independent whiskey specialists, Elixir Distiller has today signed an agreement to buy the Tormore Distillery and brand from Pernod Ricard. The acquisition is the latest move from the co-founders and owners Rajbir and Sukhinder Singh to develop Elixir Distillers into a world-leading brand owner, distiller, and independent bottler. Note the lack of use of an Oxford comma there. Distiller and independent bottler are together. I wonder if that's purposeful. Anyway. It goes on. Sukhinder Singh explained, quote, Tormore is one of the most visually stunning distilleries in Speyside. He's not wrong. Some people would say
He is
that's
not
opinion.
wrong.
That's fact. That's fact.
Remember, we're not meant to be riffing in the reading section.
Calm down. It produced...
That was a calm down to Murray. Calm down, Murray. Calm down.
Oh, that's right. It produces a beautiful spirit and fits in perfectly with Elixir Distillers' flavor-first philosophy to bottle only the very highest quality whiskies.
I hope they spell philosophy with an F there and put it on T-shirts.
Oh,
Flavor
F.
first philosophy.
Oh, man. We are hoping to build on the work that's been done by Pernod Ricard to bring to life the magic of Tormore and to show consumers around the world just what a hidden gem it is. We are humbled to be the new custodians of Tormore. We couldn't have asked for a better distillery to welcome to the Elixir family alongside our new Islay distillery, Port Askaig. There you go.
I see they put their new one. You should be saying the old news Islay distillery, Port Askaig.
My point is, I knew Sukhinder would say the words for me, and I didn't want to take the words from Sukhinder's mouth.
Nobody believes you read that press release before this moment. Nobody believes that.
Tormore Distillery was built in 1960, designed by renowned architect and president of the Royal Academy, Sir Albert Richardson, whose style combined neoclassicism and modernism. Historically,
Neoclassicism.
Classicism? Classicism?
Classicism? Classicism.
Catechism.
Neologism.
Circumcision?
Muzzle!
Historically known as, quote, the Pearl of Speyside, the beauty and uniqueness of its architectural design were recognized in 1986 when the distillery was granted listed building status.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't know it was a listed building. Oh.
Well,
it makes sense, but...
I was going to say something. I'm retracting it. But it does make sense. It's one of the first distilleries you encounter when you travel north to Speyside, and it is located close to Cragganmore, Ballindalach, and Glenfarclas distilleries. And I'm going to return to my comment about the Oxford comma. There was no Oxford comma used here. I think it's just a grammatical choice. So I'm going to continue.
Glad we cleared that up.
Tormore Distillery has been owned by Pernod Ricard since 2005. It is among one of the larger distilleries in Scotland with a capacity of just under 5 million litres of alcohol per year, providing the potential for long-term growth. The deal with Elixir Distillers includes inventory of aged stock. Alexander Ricard, chairman and CEO of Pernod Ricard, stated, quote, active portfolio management is an integral part of our long-term strategy. The sale of the Tormore brand and distillery follows the recent announcement of our investment behind the Aberlour and Milton Duff distilleries. There you go.
Which we covered on Extra.
Which will increase our Scotch whisky capacities by 14 million litres of alcohol per annum. So that's interesting. Offload a distillery that gives you 5 million, but increase by 19 million, right? Because you have to make up for that difference to get the extra 14 million litres of pure alcohol. That's interesting. We are delighted to be handing Tormore over to Sukhinder and Rajbir, two friends and truly creative entrepreneurs, and look forward to finding new ways to collaborate in the future. That's the end of Alexander's quote. The PR piece continues, and this is the final paragraph here. Sukhinder and Rajbir foresee a bright future for Tormore. Quote, we're committed to creating a new era for Tormore. Our goal is to establish the reputation of Tormore on the global stage to match the special quality of the whiskey. We want Tormore to stand shoulder to shoulder alongside the biggest names in single malt whiskey, and we plan to release a brand range that Scotland will be proud of. We want to make this a real destination for all visitors to Speyside. We will be refurbishing the distillery, and we will also plan to build a visitor center. So I wanted to put that in front of our listeners, but because this was a slightly shorter piece, I just wanted to pop in here a little bit of history that came from ScotchWhiskey.com. If you'll amuse me, Jason, if you'll indulge me,
I will indulge you this time.
Thank you. So,
do not make a habit of it.
So if you go to ScotchWhiskey.com, which unfortunately is no longer updated, but I would argue is one of the best resources online when it comes to the history
agreed.
of distilleries and ownership and just a lot of ins and outs of the Scotch whiskey industry. So a little bit of Tormore history. Construction began in 1959, according to ScotchWhiskey.com, and Tormore began to distill in 1961. Again, it's the design of Sir Albert Richardson, then president of the Royal Academy. At that time, Tormore was a part of Long John Distillers, and its make was used mostly in the firm's eponymous blends that were major sellers in North America. It is now one of the malts used in Ballantine's, an association which dates back to when the Long John stable was bought by Allied Distillers in 1989. Tormore and Ballantine's is now part of Chivas Brothers, which is Pernod Ricard, basically. So just really quickly here, I really like the way Scotch Whiskey does this sort of timeline here, right? So it says 1959, Shenley International, owner of Long John, begins construction of Tormore. 1961, distillation begins at Tormore. 1972, Tormore stills are extended from 4 to 8. 1975, Long John and its distilleries are sold to brewer Whitbread, didn't we? Oh, who used to own Glen Ugie, right? In 1989, Allied Distillers, later Allied Domecq, purchases the spirits division of Whitbread, including Tormore. In 2004, Tormore 12-year-old is released. Now, just to be clear there, it was only released for the French market.
Wow.
Yeah. In 2005, Pernod Ricard takes over the distillery following its acquisition of Allied Domecq. In 2014, Tormore completes installation of shared gas pipe with the Glenlivet, Cragganmore, and Tomintoul. And in 2014, in the same year, Tormore 12-year-old is replaced by 14 and 16-year-old bottlings. And again, that was just for the French market. We spoke quickly with Ollie about that, and he let us know that was just for the French market. And finally, I want to go over, because I imagine there's a lot of people here who may not be familiar with Tormore, because yes, it's 5 million liters capacity, but almost all of it, just like Glenallachie, which is 4 million liters of spirit, it was all for blends, right? So I just want to go through some of the facts here. So, capacity, 5 million liters of pure alcohol. Fermentation time, 52 hours. Malt specification, unpeated. And Jason, I know you were talking about Michael Jackson saying he had tasted some earlier, a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old Tormore, and he talked about a smokiness, but this says that it's an unpeated barley here. The wash, still shape, traditional pot, coal-fired shape, into an oggy and flanged head with purifier. The washbacks are stainless steel. The water source is Achvochi Burn. Sorry, any native Gaelic speakers there. Yeast type, Maori cream. Man, it goes on. But you know what? Here, I will mention this, right? They've got 11 washbacks, and they talk about this. I think is a really cool sort of statistic. They talk about wort clarity. And we've spoken with a lot of producers that like to delineate their clarity. You know, if you have a cloudy wort, you're going to get a nuttier style of whiskey. If you have a clear wort, you get a fruitier style of whiskey. And having tasted our fair share of Tormores and having bottled our own, it makes sense that the wort clarity is clear. It's a fruitier style of whiskey. So there you go. That is the ins and outs of Tormore Distillery.
Well, and I think with these details added to the record, it'll be interesting to go forth and see what Elixir Distillers do to fermentation times, right? The rate at which it moves through the spirit safe, the barley used, the quality of casks used. This feels like a line in the sand from current ownership to new ownership.
Well, I have some thoughts and I have some ideas, and I want to share some of these thoughts and ideas with you. But I know we got a complaint from your brother Murray that said, stop riffing in the front part. So what do we do here, Jason?
Let's take a break. We'll come back in a second. In that first half, we were mentioning Michael Jackson, and as always, I've got the 1989 edition of his his malt whiskey companion in my hands. And so you talked about a statement of fact earlier. It's reiterated here by Michael Jackson. Tormore, architecturally the most elegant of all malt distilleries. He does go on actually later, a couple of paragraphs later, to talk about Tormore was erected in 1958. So
no one has the
we've got 58 floating around, we've got 59 floating around, we've got 60 floating around, we've got Spirit ran in 61. We're certainly in a key period there, but he does add in, it was the first completely new malt distillery to be built in the Highlands in the 20th century.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's very right, because most of these other distilleries, like the big build-outs, were 1897. And then you had the Pattison crash around the turn of the century, right? So
Then if you chart build dates, you get dates in the 1960s, some dates in the 1970s. But here we are, if you go with this 58 to 61, there was really nobody building fully or completely new in that exact period.
And during that time,
in the Highlands.
But during that time, I think that Speyside was still considered Highlands, right? So you had Glenallachie that was built in 67. So even if, regardless, that was almost a decade later. So anyway.
Yeah, the thing I was checking on the map there is, as we've talked about it multiple times and just mentioned it actually quite recently in travelling north with Jess, where I always think Tormore is closer to the A9 than it is. It is still the first you meet when you leave that A9 at Granton-on-Spey, right? What I then follow up forget is that once you hit Tormore, you're just a couple of bends and you're at Cragganmore, then Ballindalloch, then up and round the hill and over a bit. And you've got Knockdhu over on that side of the burn. You've got Glenfarclas over here on the right side of the road. Like it really, as soon as you hit Tormore, it really starts taking off for distillery visits. But there's really nothing before you hit Tormore. Although now that I've said that, the new Gordon MacPhail distillery is much closer to the A9. And Jess and I passed that site.
That's interesting. So that they can no longer
It's
stake the claim of like I always felt as if
exactly.
Tormore was welcome to Speyside, and you see that gorgeous building, which in my mind
Yeah.
always felt like, I mean, granted, from a visual perspective, it didn't feel this way, but it was like the Wonka factory, right? Where you pass by
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
gorgeous, and you wonder, what is it? If it's this beautiful on the outside, what must it look like on the inside?
And without a visitor centre and without knowing somebody on the inside at Chivas or Pernod Ricard, we've never been inside it.
There you go. Knock, knock, knocking on Oliver Chilton's door. Wow. Hi, 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 hi.
It was fun though, and I know you and I have said it before, and I think I've probably said it with everybody I've driven by it with, and the latest with driving by it with Jess, which is, how does that not have a visitor centre? How can it be in 2022 you can't go for a tour around Tormore? At the same time, there's no brand around Tormore. There's no single malt range around
Yeah,
Tormore. Like, sometimes I think these whiskey companies wonder who would come and visit, right? If we're not putting in the brand work,
mhm,
no one's going to come here from France. No one's going to come here from Brazil or America or anywhere else. And it's just not true. You would absolutely, especially when you're the first distillery you
yeah,
pass coming off the
yeah.
A9 on your way towards Speyside, you would stop. You'd go, oh, look at that building.
I
I'll
guess
have to go and have a wee look at that.
I think given the 21st century's sensibilities, and more specifically, right, the 2010s, the 2020s sensibilities, of course, we stand there thinking, yeah, why wouldn't you? But think about when it was built, right? The very late 50s, the very early 60s, single malt whiskey wasn't even a marketed
Oh, no.
thing. There were no
No.
single malt
No, no, no.
brands,
No.
period. And even when they became a thing, whiskey tourism wasn't really a thing for many years, for many decades. I mean, some distilleries here and there, but by and large, it wasn't. And your point about their liquid being primarily used for blends, right? The brand was Ballantine's. The brand was whatever, Long John blend it happened to go to. And
You just like saying Long John.
well, I'm trying so desperately to not say Long John Silver. And so
Oh, good job. You haven't said it yet, so you're doing fantastic.
so
Kudos to
it
you.
makes sense, but this is, here we are now in the 2020s, and I loved reading that they're going to build out a visitor center. I can't wait. I do wonder if it's going to change the outer facade, or if they're going to adjust the inside of it, right? I do wonder where they would put the visitor center because, not having been in the distillery, you don't know where it could, if there's space already to put it or if right behind the windows.
Well, then, my question for the site, and again, yeah, we don't know the site, we don't know what it entails, but when you see those cottages that were former workers' cottages, it'll be curious to see if any of those are still attached to the distillery
Yeah.
ownership, or whether they're all in private hands. Because I feel like what Glenmurray have done with the distillery manager's house on site, where it's now this beautiful lab and tasting room and lounge with upstairs offices. Like, you couldn't necessarily turn it into a visitor centre, but the way Elixir are already talking about treating Tormore sounds like you would want a place to take some VIPs, some privileged guests,
Okay.
and kind of let them run through the spirit and the maturation and all of that. And so if more of those cottages are available, that could potentially offer up a way to still connect to the history, but introduce a visitor centre. If those are privately owned, well, do you start knocking on doors and making offers that people can't refuse? Yeah. And I mean that in a monetary sense, not in a Godfather sense.
You would mention, that's funny.
Nice cottage you've got here. It would be a shame if it burned to the ground overnight.
Oh, hi, nice cottage you have here. So you had said something I thought was quite interesting, where you said,
sounds like me.
Ooh, said I wonder, and this was, while I was reading all of the ins and outs, right? The fermentation times and all this.
It certainly gave me time to think, I can tell you that much.
There's a lot of ins and outs, Jason.
And what have yous?
And what have yous?
What fors?
You had said, I wonder, if they're going to change fermentation times and adjust this, adjust that. So here's something that struck me reading back the PR piece, where it was either Rajbir or Sikindra. I don't know who to attribute this quote to, but they referred to themselves as custodians of Tormore, right? And they have a choice to make here. They could take the Glenallachie route that Billy Walker took, where he bought this distillery that had 4 million liters of spirit capacity and truncated that down to 600,000 liters of capacity. And where he said, you know what? No more with the blenders contracts. I'm not going to sell this spirit to anyone. I'm only going to produce single malt. And then his fermentation times went to, 60 to 72 hours, up to 163 hours, and in some cases 360 some odd hours. But if Elixir Distillers purchase this, not just to create a single malt range, which will take them years to do, right? It makes sense for them to look at selling off spirit as an opportunity to make funds for various other projects, right? Perhaps to build a visitor center, right? So it'll be interesting to see if they do that. My thought is they're probably going to continue Tormore in the manner that it was, keep producing the 5 million liters of spirit.
That's the question that I've got is, does Tormore have a capacity of 5 million that it's maybe not even producing 2 right now? And so we perhaps don't know the amount of Tormore that's being produced to fulfill those blending contracts. My guess would be, given that they're fulfilling blending contracts, it is counted in the millions. And I'm sure they're closer to 5 than they are to, say, 1 or 2 million.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think at that point, once they take ownership of this, I don't think you change everything when you walk in the front door. I think you get a sense of what you're doing, what does that look like internally, and where might you want to tweak.
Yeah.
And then, they talk about the stocks being moved. How old are the stocks? If they wanted to come out with a range that was 25, 18, and 12, do they have the stocks for that? Are they going to be bringing in a whole bunch of stocks that are 12 years old at a maximum, 8 years old at a maximum, with some older stuff dotted around? So, on one hand, Tormore has been sold and Elixir own it. Woo, fly the flags. What the hell does any of that mean for the next 12 months, 2 years, 10 years of Elixir operations? Yeah. No idea, but we know the people we can speak to. We know the people we can talk to for One Nation Under Whiskey to get some of these questions answered, if not simply, well, we don't know that right now, and we don't know that right now, and we don't know that right now. So maybe we'll give them some time to get their feet under the table before we start hitting them with questions. But I would love to have a conversation about Tormore. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, yeah. I think the next step is doing exactly what you said, right? Let them get their feet on the ground and then we bring them on to One Nation Under Whiskey and have a conversation about what they're looking to do. My understanding is they don't actually take ownership of, like, actual ownership until sometime in September. And so once they have the keys to the distillery, they take stock of their stock, right?
Literally, yeah.
Right, and to figure out what the flavor profile is. I know we have just a few more minutes here if we want to adhere to our Type 35, which
Always.
Yeah. But
always.
But, you and I, having tasted Tormores from likely the 70s through to the 90s, I think you and I may have tasted more 80s Tormore than we have any other Tormore. At least that's been my personal experience. I have noted that each decade, Tormore seemed to have some sort of a change. Right? If I think about all of the 80s Tormore that we've had before, it's had this massive spicy component to it. If I think about the 70s,
big pepper.
Yeah, right, huge pepper to it. Yeah, exactly, that building pepper on the finish. The 70s Tormore has had sort of this more richer, fruitier style. And then the Tormore that we bottled, which was a 90s, I want to say it was 98, 99, something like that. Maybe 97. It was.
I have it right beside me.
Oh, do you? Oh, nice. That one was soft.
96.
96. There you go. Right. That one was soft and with sort of delicate orchard fruits. What does our tasting note say on the bottle there?
I was just reading that as you were waxing lyrical, and I gave you major kudos because it starts out delicate, and then it says both delicate and spicy at the same time. It's a classic Tormore in terms of its pepper profile, but the lemon thread that runs through it is a new wrinkle on a traditional theme. Only 156 bottles from a second fill bourbon barrel.
That was a short cast.
That was, thirsty. Thirsty angels.
You and I had samples of a 12-year-old single cask and a 16-year-old single cask. And I think back to that 12-year, which I thought was better than the 16-year. And by the way, that 12-year was bottled somewhat recently. And I think back to the flavor profile of that, and it was this wonderful mix of apple, like yellow apple, dark chocolate, right? There was a bit of salinity to it, a touch of spice across, as the finish comes about. Like it had such a wonderful profile to it. And it was first fill bourbon, yet we still got that dark chocolate component, which just floored me. I really, really enjoyed it.
I was sipping on our Tormore 21.
Yeah, I watched you. By sipping, I saw you pull from the bottle.
Straight from the bottle. While you were talking there, it is very, very tasty. Am I right in saying it was a California retail exclusive?
That was an exclusive to our distributor in California. That was a JVS exclusive.
No, it's cracking. It's really cracking. It's really bright and fruity, like some of these directions we've been seeing Tormore go.
Yeah.
But it's still got a heft to it. I really love that heft in the spirit.
That one, and I appreciate you bringing up the JVS exclusive of it. I remember you and I talking about that cask. It was bottled in 2017, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So 2017 is when we launched our retail range. And that cask, as an exclusive to JVS, was a thank you to our good friend Sam Filmus, who'd been supporting Single Cask Nation since the very beginning. And we wanted to give him his own exclusive California release. And it was that Tormore.
You and I could spend more time waxing lyrical about Tormore, and we will certainly return to it in One Nation Under Whiskey. But for the moment, I just want to extend sincere congratulations to Raj Beer and Sukinder for securing this distillery, which in this day and age of established distilleries moving from conglomerate to conglomerate, to see two chaps secure this deal is really wonderful. And I think it's a really good look for the industry. And so kudos to them for pulling it off, for partnering it with Port Trewin and obviously all the other projects that they've got under that banner. And hopefully we'll have a chance to speak to them in the future about this whole endeavour.
I'm excited to visit the distillery.
And taste some new make running from the stills.
Man, oh man, Manischewitz.
All right, let's get out of here, Joshua. Thanks to you. Thanks to Elixir for sending in the PR piece. PR companies, don't get excited. And thanks, as always, to our dear listeners for coming along with us on the ride. Go forth, formulate your own opinions on the sale of Tormore. If you want to email us your conclusions, you can get us at questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com, no E in whiskey, or info@singlecasknation.com. And we would love to hear your thoughts on the sale of Tormore. And on that note, we're going to get out of here. Cheers all. Cheers, dear listeners. Cheers, Joshua.
Cheers, Jason.
Peace.
Peace.